What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Get Paid for Your Pad. Now, I haven't been able to record a lot of podcasts lately, and I'll give everybody a quick update on what's going on behind the scenes. I've received quite a few emails from people asking, like, "Hey, what's going on? Like, where's the weekly podcast? Um, are you quitting?" Or things like that. But I am not quitting. I will continue this podcast for as long as the foreseeable future, and maybe even for my entire life. Who knows? But yeah, it's been a very hectic time for me. We moved apartments about a month ago, so that kind of took a lot of time, and then also it's been very, very busy with our new revenue management service. We are now up to 16 clients with over 600 listings under management, and we just have a huge pipeline of companies that are interested in working with us. So it's been super exciting and super fun, but also it's been pretty hectic to manage all that. And so I am very, very, very happy that we now have 2 new team members on our team that are supporting me, because 600 listings is a lot more than I can handle by myself. So today I want to introduce our newest team member, Mr. Tom Sharkey. Tom, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Jasper. Pleasure to be on.
Yeah.
And
yeah, man.
Yeah, it's representing the Free Wild brand. Reach out to us. We're looking for more clients. I'm a new team member of Free Wild, and super excited to be part of Jasper's team. Been learning a lot and just trying to dish out as much value as I can.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's cool that we're both wearing the Free Wild shirt. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can see our cool T-shirts that we created for Free Wild. But yeah, Tom, why don't you give us a quick background? You have a lot of experience in the short-term rental space, so would love to get a quick intro from you.
Yeah, so I started with short-term rentals in 2018, just with my own personal property. Rented it out on the weekends, and then quickly found out, all right, this can be definitely a lucrative business. And then I started to do the rental arbitrage on a couple units, and then quickly found just networked with a bunch of real estate investors for managing their properties. I remember going to real estate meetups and just saying, "Hey, is anyone doing this?" And everyone was like, "No, it's too much work." And I was like, "You're right. It's a lot of work. I'll do it for you." And just kind of showed some people the numbers, and they're like, "Okay, these are pretty good numbers." And doing double, triple, or sometimes more than what a long-term rental would do. And so I quickly scaled up from about 3 units to a little over 50 units in the span of about 2 years. My market was Kansas City, the Kansas City area, mostly on the Missouri side, but I did go into Kansas and also went into southern Missouri for a few units in like the Lake of the Ozarks. And then loved the business, had a ton of learning lessons. My strategy was buy and hold. Some rental arbitrage, and that did pretty well. And then, but really, my bread and butter was the management for other clients. And at the time when I got started, Kansas City had some reasonable regulations, and so I thought I was pretty safe by scaling and really only staying in Kansas City. But then in 2013, 2023, they passed regulations that were very stringent and essentially squashed the industry, except unless you got grandfathered. I had a couple properties that got grandfathered into it, so I'm okay there. But a lot of my clients, they did not get grandfathered in. And so I descaled the company over a span of a year because I just saw it coming. I'm like, oh, better get ahead of it. I kind of advise my clients, get a long-term renter in there, get it on the market. Interest rates are going up, like not a bad time to sell, or get a long-term renter in there. And so, and then I, landed that plane about a couple months ago, and then then saw a job opportunity with Jasper Free Wild, and I was like, I know where that guy's going, so I want to follow him.
Yeah, and shout out to Steve Trover at Better Talent. That's a company that what we're using to hire all of our new employees, and we're still looking for a junior, no, a revenue management assistant to to help Tom and I with the management of our portfolios. So, if you are interested in that position, then go over to bettertalent.com, and you should be able to find our page. And I have to say, Better Talent was great to work with. They really supported us on the hiring side and took a lot of work off our plate and brought a lot of value when it comes to like really understanding like who's the perfect candidate. They have a very easy to use CRM as well. Where we can see all the applicants, we can move them to different stages in the process, and it's been an awesome experience. So shout out to Better Talent. If you are looking to hire, highly recommend working with them. By the way, how was that experience on your side, Tom?
Yeah, it was good. It was clean. They had me fill out a personality index, and I thought that was really interesting. I'm imagining that there's some kind of mapping tool of like, hey, this person's analytical or this person's maybe influential, um, and uh, and then just I think I got like a drip of emails, but yeah, it was a really good process from a job hunter standpoint too.
Yeah. Yeah, I love the psychology test that they do. Basically, they based on the role, they create a certain like personality profile that would fit that role best, and that's something that I think is very, very important because obviously we need like the experience and the skill sets and all of that. But it's really important that you have the personality that kind of fits the role, because otherwise like you're just not going to be happy in that role, right? Like for just to give a quick example, like somebody who's when you do revenue management, it's a lot of looking at numbers by yourself on a laptop, and you kind of have to enjoy that process. Like if you're somebody who kind of needs to be around people and socializing, then you're not going to be able to really enjoy this type of job, right? So it's really important that we find like the right personality, but also what's very important for us is the right culture fit. I think that's something that a lot of companies kind of underestimate, and something that we've learned definitely the hard way. Of when you need a team member, you usually like want that person fast, right? Because you have a lot of work on your plate and you're trying to get that work off your plate. And so it's like, okay, the sooner we can get that person, the better. And so it's very tempting to just look at like experience and skill set, and just, the first person that you feel like can do the job, you just kind of want to hire that person. But then like it saves so much time if you spend a little bit more time to really figure out like, has this person have the right personality? Does this person fit our culture, the culture of our company? There's a saying that if you don't create the culture, like your employees will, right? So it's very important that you understand the culture of your company and you really look for that culture fit there. So we spent quite a bit of time. I think we spent about 2 months, from the start all the way until we started with Tom like 2 weeks ago. So just as a little piece of advice there, if you are going to hire, then really take your time. Another saying is, I think there's a book called Who that talks about hiring, and one thing that always stuck with me is like hire slow and fire fast, which we've in the past definitely done the opposite. Hire like the first person that has, can do the job, and then when you find out it's actually not a good culture fit, you're kind of hesitant to like let them go, because it's that means you have to start over, and that's not very appealing, right? So anyway, that's we could do a whole other podcast on hiring, and I'm sure we will in the future, but today we want to talk more about revenue management, because that's what Tom and I are doing on a daily basis. That's where we spend all of our time on. I have gotten rid of pretty much everything else that was on my plate, with new team members that have been added to the Freeball team. So I am pretty much like 100% in revenue management right now, and so is Tom. So I want to talk about, what did you learn so far, Tom? What are some of the things that we've learned over the last couple months in revenue management? I think there's a lot that we can share. I'll start it off with, just kind of expressing what I've learned from all the companies that have applied for our service. And like I said, we have 16 clients now with just over 600 listings, but we've had over 100 companies, I think, apply. Not every company that applies is the right fit. We're looking for a very specific type of company to work with, but we do try to help everybody who's applying as much as possible by directing them in a certain way or providing some resources. But yeah, it's one thing that's become really clear to me through this process is that people are definitely in the industry starting to realize that revenue management is not something that you can just do on the side for like an hour or two a week. It requires daily focus. And it sounds like everyone's kind of learning that in the industry. As we all know, it's gotten a lot more competitive out there. And so, this set it and forget it strategy of basically having a pricing tool do your revenue management, it's just not really working anymore, right? In order to outperform, it really requires like a specific focus from somebody who has the skill set and somebody who loves numbers and graphs and looking at that stuff the whole day, right? So it's been interesting to see that mentality shift. I remember when I first started using a pricing tool, I had that same mindset of like, all right, cool. So now the pricing tool is going to do all the pricing for me, and I can just sit back and let it do its thing. But it's really more like, I think, Tom, I know you love analogy, so like I'm gonna throw an analogy out there. It's like the car and the driver, right? You can have the fastest car in the world, right? But if you're going to race and you don't know how to drive that car, it's going to end up on the side of the road, right? It's the car is not going to win that race by herself. And I think that's a great analogy. And I think actually, like, I borrowed that from Mr. John Ann, who also manages revenue. I think he came up with that analogy first, so shout out to him. But yeah, Tom, what's your thought on that? Like, you've managed like 50 listings, you've done the revenue management. Like, what have you kind of learned throughout the years around that topic?
Yeah, I think the market, the short-term rental market, or I should say, the short-term rental industry is maturing. It has been maturing for the past, about 2 years or so. There was COVID, and then there was the comeback of travel, and people were tired of lockdowns and all that stuff, and then and it's really market dependent, but somewhere along the way, maybe travel has kind of tapered off since that kind of initial boom of releasing of the lockdowns. And so, just to answer it into another analogy, it's like a big tree, that short-term rental industry tree, and everyone's going up and picking the low-hanging fruit. And the low-hanging fruit, it might still be there in some markets, but at least what we're seeing now is the industry is just getting a lot more competitive, and it's already picked off that low hanging fruit. And so you need those people who are like, no, I got a ladder, and now I'm going to get into there, and actually I got this, this tool I don't have to climb a ladder. I can extract fruit from the branches. And so all analogies break down eventually, but the low hanging fruit's gone. I think in most markets, unless you're kind of in just one of those quiet markets that you're a leader in, or not many people really know about. And so, as far as revenue management goes, I think, like you said, and we're all guilty of this, I think, of set it and forget it. And unless you've scaled so large that now you can take on a revenue manager to go there and just be full-time, I kind of say satellite mode, satellite stay open to collect a bunch of data. You need someone sitting at the computer, daily to be looking at the market every day, looking where's that booking window, what's the length of stay, and then just being able to absorb all that market data, and also, really honing in on your filters. You're only as smart as your filters. There's so much noise out there in the market, but you got to make sure you're selecting, your comp sets are accurate to your portfolio or to a specific, property, if you're just managing a property or two. And so, it is a good time um, to consider reaching out to Free Wild and asking if you and filling out their our survey to see if you qualify and if it's a good fit, because really it's a competitive market out there. You really need a professional or a team of professionals that's dedicated. There is a clear difference between property management, the upkeep, the maintenance, the cleaning of the property, the guest communication, of having that hospitality, of whether it's VAs or whether you're communicating to the guests yourselves. Uh, there Those are very different skill sets of maintaining a property, communicating to guests, and revenue management. Those three right there are very different. And then there's a whole marketing, kind of business aspect of making sure you're on different OTAs. And that really goes into, and at Free Wild, we really help out with that revenue management as well. But hey, how many OTAs are you on? And really, we're really just dedicated to revenue management, and we can be an extension of the business, if you will. So
100%. And how did you manage how did you do your revenue management when you were still operating those 50 units? Was that your focus? Obviously, like, I know you love doing it. That's why you joined our team. But what was kind of like your experience? Like, was it easy for you to do that with everything else that you had going on?
it was not easy. No, especially in the low season. Of all the seasons, I think I crushed it in the summer season, but then I whiffed a lot of the times. Not on every single property, but I whiffed a lot on the slow season because I didn't do the prep work for slow season, which it's a larger time nets. I say is like, all right, for low season, at least in my market, it seemed you need to prepare for that low season starting in August or September. Like, really start pricing your strategy, pricing your places in January and February, to get some of those month plus stays, or just start getting bookings. Because I just remember, I started in 2018, and there was a few years in a row where I was like, oh, I'll get last minute bookings. Yeah, I will get last minute bookings, but they're only for the weekends, and so so that was one area that I definitely could have worked on more. But then when it came to peak season, I just remember doing really good, blowing it out of the water.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. I think that's something that has kind of seeped into our strategies when it comes to revenue management, because COVID, the market was so strong right after COVID that it became like a thing to have like huge like future premiums, and like nobody was concerned about just getting bookings, right? Everyone was just focused on like get more units, right? And so it wasn't really getting bookings wasn't the hardest part. And so people didn't really think about like, hey, the slow season is coming up in a couple months, like we should adjust our prices now. We should not be adding a premium to those dates. We need to get as many bookings as possible for January and February, if you're in a market where that's the low season, right? And making those days easy to book, right? Not putting like huge minimum night stay restrictions on those dates, because when the demand is low, we gotta be as flexible as possible to attract as many bookings as possible, right? And I think now people are kind of starting to realize that, because I'm sure everybody has gone through this experience of looking at that empty calendar and then looking at the competition and seeing like where the competition is priced at, and just realizing like, wow, right, as of right now, like because I'm so late thinking about this stuff, I now have to basically like undercut the competition in order to get booked, and that's not a great feeling, is it?
Right. Yeah. If you see the last year in your low market that your market was booked, 35-40%. Well, what do you want it to be? You want to be competing for that 35-40. You don't want to be competing last minute for that. What if you start putting friendly prices way ahead of time and you're booked at 60%? Now, you got to make sure that you're pricing safely, so you're getting your target guess. But how I've viewed in some of the properties in my portfolio, some of my clients advise me, hey, if we can just get the bills paid, because we're gonna crush it in the peak season. Can we just pay the bills in the low season? And I loved it when clients told me that. It's like, you get it. Yeah, this is not the money. Maybe let's try and make money. That's not to say that we don't try and make money, but that's not the money making months. That's not the time where risk on is. And the other thing I keep in mind too is just the macro trends. Interest rates have been going up, the past couple of years, and the economy's slowing down. There's not a lot of corporate travel, and so small businesses and large corporations, it's the easiest thing. We're in an industry where, whether it's personal budgeting or corporate budgeting, we're the easiest thing to cut. I can't think of anything else unless you're talking about frivolous spending. And so just know the season, know the markets, know we're ending a business cycle. And good thing is, a couple weeks ago the Fed pivoted, so maybe we'll be entering a new business cycle, which does mean more money, means more money out there, and more money to land in reservations for your properties.
Yeah, 100%. So you've been working for FreeWild now for about 2 weeks or so. What are some things that you've learned or noticed, or what's kind of been your experience so far in the last 2 weeks?
And I took your course, the Cash Flow Mastery course, and just consumed it all in about a week. In the first week, just taking notes, putting it to practice, using some of those tools that you supplied, and some of the major takeaway. I mean, there's been a lot of major takeaways, but one of them is tracking that booking window, the booking window, and your pacing. Are you pacing with? So pacing is, are you on course, kind of like what you were last year? If last year you were at, the whole market was at 35%, is the market is the market this year at 35% or 32%? Are you about pacing, or is the market this year at 45% and last year was 35%? Okay, what's going on then? That means there's a higher demand this year. So just tracking the pacing, tracking the booking window, because that's the opportunity. I see that as like, maybe not an on and off switch, but like a very sensitive dial, if you will, that has that you need to be honed in on that. It's kind of the sweet spot to find, hey, after this time, 50% of the bookings are coming in, and before this time, 50%. That's the needle you need to keep an eye on, and the pacing is a helpful tool too to kind of see how last year's benchmark was, and is it different, or is it less demand, or is it more demand, or is it about the same? That's
booking window.
That's been a big one.
Yeah, booking window is super interesting, mostly because we don't actually know the booking window until after the fact, right? We can make an estimate of what we think the booking window is going to be based on last year, based on what we're currently seeing in the market, but we really don't know it until after the fact, which makes it one of the most interesting parts of revenue management. I mean, revenue management is full of unknowns, right? Which is why it's like almost more of an art than a science, or it's kind of in the middle, just kind of like economics, right? They call economics I think they call it like the dismal science or something like that, because some people will argue like it's not a science. Like you can't like come to like a hard conclusion. You can only kind of like look at correlations and look at empirical data to kind of predict things and but you can't really, it's not like mathematics where it's like 1+1 is 2 and nobody can argue about that, right? And it's revenue management is kind of that way too. There are some hard laws, of course. I mean, there's the law of supply and demand. There's a number of economic laws that kind of apply, but booking window is definitely a very interesting one, and it can, you can kind of freak out if the booking window shrinks, which it kind of has done in a lot of markets. I'm looking at certain ski markets, for example. A lot of ski markets, like bookings are down quite a bit, right? The ski season is like December to March, and I know there's a lot of operators right now who are telling me that they don't have as many bookings. They don't have, especially for like Christmas and New Year. And so they're starting to freak out a little bit of like, wow, what's happening? Normally last year in September, I was at 30-40% occupancy, and now I'm at like 15 or 20, right? Is that just because people are booking later, or has the demand softened, right? That's always the big question. It's like, did the booking window shift, or are we pacing towards like a very weak season? And you can't really tell, right, until after the fact. Then you really know. You can look back and say, okay, sometimes I've seen some of my portfolios where we were pacing way behind, but then it would catch up towards the end of the month. So looking back, the market actually did the same as last year, or maybe slightly better. But when you were looking a month in advance, you'd think that it would be a very bad month, right? So it's like, that's just an example of like, sometimes it's the booking window that changed, and sometimes it's demand that has changed, or supply. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Some of the markets that I've looked into in our portfolio is like, for instance, occupancy right now for let's say Thanksgiving, or no, let's use Christmas. Christmas in a lot of the markets is not, the booking window is not right now. It's let's say the occupancy is 20% right now for Christmas. Just seems, we'll say 15%. But then you look at the final occupancy of last year, and it was at 86%. And it's like, okay, it's clearly not the booking window right now. And you look at the pickup, you look at the last 30 days or 7 days, and so you get certainty, you get some clarification. I right now is not the time to really hone in on that specific like holiday. That's something that's coming around the bend. Right now it's Thanksgiving. And so yeah, it's important to watch that pacing and that difference too. Like, hey, we're pacing at last year. The bookings just don't come right now. They just don't. And so if you freak out and you're like, oh, I gotta drop my prices 50% or 25%, and you get booked right now, well, you got booked before the demand wave came. So you're looking for that demand wave. It's not there right now. It's kind of like surfing. Do you go out surfing when the waves are bad, and are you freaking out? No, you plan to go out surfing when the waves are awesome, and you wait for that demand wave. So.
Is there good surfing in Savannah where you live?
I've seen some surfers, yeah, over on Tybee Island, and I wouldn't say good, no, but I've seen a little bit.
Well, I live 5 minutes from the beach now, so I have no excuse not to learn how to surf. Other than the water's cold. That's not an excuse either, because we can wear a wetsuit, right? But yeah, I love that analogy, right? It's and you mentioned pickup. I think that's a really important metric to look at, right? Pickup essentially means like what percentage of the market got booked in the last X amount of days, right? The last 7 days or the last 30 days. And so to your point, like if that booking window has changed, then like pickup will kind of tell you how it's changing, right? If you're looking at last year and you're like, oh, last year I had way more bookings on the books than now at this time. If you look at the pickup and you see suddenly like, hey, in the last 7 days, it actually like 10% of the market got booked, right? Then you kind of know like, oh, okay, so probably the booking window is starting now, right? Where last year it was starting more like a month earlier or so. So then you kind of know like, it's almost like looking at pickup is almost like standing on the beach with binoculars and seeing if there's any big waves coming in the far out, right? So you can kind of predict a little bit what's going to happen that way, but you never know for sure though. Let's see. We're probably going to do a lot of podcasts together, I'm sure, because we're learning every day. But let's just touch on one more learning lesson of something that you've noticed or something that we've learned in the last couple of weeks of us working together.
Yeah, really, really utilizing the neighborhood. So we use Price Labs pricing tool, super good. You know, eh, we think they're the best, the most friendliest to use, and so I just love their seasonality function on there, and just being able to get those market dashboards to find out where's the peak season. Like there's one thing to go through and say, yeah, I have a feeling that this is peak season. I have a feeling that this is shoulder season, but getting the data to really um, put those markers there for you to either validate your feeling or to teach you something different. Um, and, uh, and, and then you're able to kind of segment the year of like, okay, they have a season, what's it called? I can't remember what it's called, but it's a seasonality. I can't remember what it's called, but you get to segment the year in seasons of, okay, this is my low season. It's super customizable with, you can get exact to the dates where if you want to isolate something just for that Thanksgiving weekend or just that Christmas weekend, Christmas week, you can isolate those and call it Christmas week. And so it doesn't, it's not only the month, but being able to do that. So that way you can kind of, it's hard as an operator to just, you can't just obviously put a blanket statement on in terms of pricing and revenue over the whole year, or even just per quarter. Like sometimes, for instance, Thanksgiving and Christmas are, they're like weeks that are clear. You in many markets they're very clearly different from all the other weeks in the month. Um, in many markets, November and December are low season except for those weeks. Those weeks can be like spike, and so it's really helpful to segment and kind of cut your year up in pies and in different sizes of like, hey, during this segment the pricing does this. It fluctuates on this, high levels during my during my high season, and then hey, let's, depending on your risk, it's all dependent on your risk tolerance, the financials of the property. Um, but with the low season, I I really appreciate being able to do that. Of like, hey, we really want to get bookings here because this is the time to get bookings. This is not the time to be uh, going out there aggressively last minute and in the low season. So that's
Yeah.
been a super helpful tool.
Yeah, 100%. And just to kind of wrap up this podcast, I'll share one more thing that I'm noticing that I think a lot of hosts can improve on is a lot of people have their minimum night stay settings set up where it's like, let's say you have like a 2-2 as a default, and then you'll do like a 2-3. And when I say 2-2, I mean like 2 minimum stay on the weekdays and 2 on the weekends. And then typically like 30 days out, people will set it at like 2-3, right? So for the weekends, people book a weekend like more than 30 days out. You'll have to book like a Friday to Monday or like a Thursday to Saturday, right? And then they'll typically add, maybe like a 3-4 or a 4-4 for 60 days out. All right. So the further in advance people book, the more restrictive it is when it comes to minimum night stay settings. And to me, that's something that I've been challenging a lot on our portfolios because it doesn't really make sense to me. I get the idea of like, hey, if somebody books far out, like, we want a longer booking because we don't want these short little bookings blocking a potential longer booking, right? But if you're like, for example, right now, if you have that strategy where you're very restrictive, like 4 or 5 night minimum stay, like 60 days out, that means that like, December, January, February, it's very hard for people to book. And you have to look at the length of stay, the median length of stay for those months. If you look in the Price Labs market dashboard, or if you're using Key Data or AirDNA, whatever it is, you can see what the length of stay is, right? And if the average length of stay is like 2 nights, and you're setting your minimum night stay at like 4 or 5, you're pretty much cutting out like 70-80% of the demand, right? And that's in your and January, February might be your slowest months, right? So you might want to reconsider, if you have those settings, like you might want to reconsider and say like, well, unless you're going for an MTR strategy, a midterm rental strategy for the winter, where you're just doing monthly stays. If you're focused on short-term rentals, you got to get as many bookings now for those months, and you should not have those long minimum night stay restrictions. It's better to get, even if it's like a couple 2 or 3 night stays, it's better to have some bookings there already than waiting, trying to fill that stuff up last minute. And I understand where the reasoning comes from, because again, like people are worried that like, you get like one booking in the middle of January and now you can't book it out for the entire month, right? But I think you have to make a strategic choice there. You have to think, okay, what's our strategy for the low season, right? Is it short-term rentals or is it midterm rentals? And both can be a valid option. We have several portfolios where we're doing MTRs for the winter. And so we set it usually like November through March, or sometimes November through February, depending on the market. We'll put it, or sometimes like January through March, right? Thanksgiving and Christmas are a big demand driver in the market, and you might want to keep November and December open for short terms. But if you are focusing on midterm rentals for the winter, then you gotta set that strategy up now, and you gotta make that decision. And there's good ways of doing that, using like the Airbnb monthly discount, setting your prices higher than what you're targeting in revenue, and then adding a discount on Airbnb, at least like 20-30%, I think is good to attract those monthly stays. But if you're not going to focus on MTRs, then you got to get as many bookings now as possible. So you got to make it very easy for people to book. You got to your point, you got to make sure that pricing is competitive. Don't have that far out premium there. Just decide like what rate you're comfortable with, and just start attracting those bookings now, because the competition probably does have a far premium on there, or like a more restrictive minimum night stay settings. And so if you're the only one who's accepting 2 night stays in January or February, and you already have a competitive price, you're way more likely to start filling up that calendar, right? And you're sending a signal to Airbnb too and other platforms of like, hey, I'm being flexible for this time period, right? Once you get a couple bookings, guess what? The OTA can see that. And if somebody is searching for those months and you already have a bunch of bookings, the OTA knows like, hey, this property already got booked for that month. Let's show this property first, right? And that's how you get momentum for those low season, for those low demand months. So with that said, Tom, let's wrap up this podcast. I appreciate you jumping on here. I'm sure we'll do a lot more podcasts. We have a lot to talk about, and now that you're helping me with the revenue management, I'm going to have more time as well to do these podcasts. So my goal is to do at least one podcast a week, and eventually, once we get a few more team members, in particular the revenue management assistant that we definitely need, then I'll probably go back to 2 times a week, every Monday and Friday, like I used to do. So with that said, any last words before we wrap up here, Tom?
Just super excited to be a part of the team. We're excited to serve our client base and get more clients. And yeah, this was a blast. Can't wait to do it again.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah, we'll be back soon. And if you are interested in our revenue management service, we do have an application form. You can schedule a discovery call with us where we can get to know you and see if it's a good fit for us to work together or not. You can find all that information at freewildfoundry.com/rpm. So freewildfoundry.com/rpm. With that said, I hope you'll have a great weekend. I'm actually going to be in Idlewild, California, where our cabins are located. We just finished the renovation of our Wildwood Park, is what we call it, which is basically 2 acres of land that we have around our cabins that we've completely renovated with like stargazing nets and like games and yoga areas and picnic areas, and it's going to be a lot of fun to see that. So Tom, thanks for joining, man, and thanks everybody for listening. We'll be back soon, and have a great weekend.